Hello everyone. I'm sitting on my patio, birds chirping in the background, turkeys gobbling in the woods. It's a pretty good morning. I hope all of you are doing well. This week's episode, we get our standard tractor working and plowing for our garden. Get one of my big saws out to cut down a few trees and push some brush back to make room for most of my tractors so I can get them all in one spot. There's also a little work done on the tractor panels as well as the Goldwing carburetors. Hope you enjoy this episode. So this is the shifter off of the standard tractor. This is what puts it in neutral, forward, and reverse. This was stuck, so I had to take it off. That piece right there that you see moving by this button here, spring-loaded internally, that moves it, allows it to lock or unlock so it can change gears. So now that I've got it working, we'll put it back on the tractor and then we should be about ready to do some plowing. So as you can see, I had a couple of plows to choose from before I finally found the one that actually goes to this tractor. So we got all this hooked up and set up correctly. Got fresh gas in it. I got the shifter working well now. So we're going to fire this thing up and drive it around a little bit. So I'm not going to say this is the first time we started this thing like they do on television. We have had this running already. So we're going to fire this thing up again and take it out back, go through the motions with it, make sure the transmission all works good before we get ready to plow later in the week. Let's see here. I'm about to plow with my standard twin. You've already heard it run and you know that it moves, but I'm going to go over some of the other controls here so when you watch me doing it you'll have a clue as to what I'm doing. You know about the transmission lever that controls forward and reverse so far. This is the clutch here. When I push this forward, that activates the clutch and allows it to move. When I pull it back, it disengages it. And these two handles here on each side of the machine are the brakes. So instead of trying to force it around a turn, what you do is you lock one side. Like if I lock this side, that'll cause the right wheel to lock, it'll spin right. If I lock this one down, that'll cause the left wheel to lock and it'll spin to the left. So anyway, when you see me doing all these different things with these levers, then you'll have an idea of what it is that I'm doing, and fingers crossed we'll get this done safely. Plowing's done now, so it's going to rain the next few days, but once that clears off, we'll get the tiller down here and break these big clumps up. We'll be just about ready to plant our garden. Old plow did a real good job. So there's a plow in here also that's trying to be claimed by nature. It's called a Little Genius plow. It was sold by Sears Roebuck way back in the day. Bought it a long time ago. Forgot I had it, and I'm doing a little cleaning down here, and I'm going to get this out of here as well, so making more room, pushing back on the property for my garden. As you can see, it's still in there. Cut down a couple more saplings and a few more vines, and I'll be able to drag that thing out of there. So here it is, all pulled out. It's a 2-bottom plow. Everything seems to be there and could be in working order if I wanted to, but I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this thing. But regardless, it's still a pretty old, cool piece of history. The pull cord on one of my big saws is acting up, so I'm taking it apart to see what I can do to fix it. This finger here is supposed to sling out when you pull it. It looks like it's just a little stuck. Need to throw a little grease in there, and it should work fine after that. Alright, now that we got the pull cord taken care of, let's see if she fires off.
Alright, viewers, this is the moment I become single. What'd you say? You'll find out when you watch. I'm about ready to put these Goldwing carburetors back together. Before I do, I want to share something with you. If you see this plug right here, each one of the carburetors has one, and underneath that plug is a passageway as part of the pilot jet circuit. And the problem is that this carburetor here, as you can see, it's missing. So when I spray through this port here, what it should do is come out of the throat of the carburetor when it's actually coming out of that hole. Now the reason that's there is so that it's easier to do the machining for the carburetor to get the passages machined correctly, and then they put a plug over top of it to seal it off. That plug was missing when I took it apart. It ran okay, but that particular carburetor is going to be a little sluggish off idle. So we're going to figure out a way to fabricate a plug for that thing, but we'll start putting the other three back together in the meantime. So these are the seats for the float needles. That's what allows gas to enter the carburetors. You see the one on the right has a busted O-ring, so I'll go to a hardware store and pick up an O-ring for that. But I can continue putting at least a couple of the other carburetors back together. That seat's back in place. I used gum cutter as a lubricant to push it through so we didn't tear up that O-ring. So I got this 212 in a trade. It's got a blade and snow chains. No deck with this one, but it did run good. I think I'm going to let this one go. So I'm going to get it fired up, make sure it runs good before I do. Alright, so in doing some testing, what I found out here is that the ignition switch was bad. I already knew that, but I wasn't getting any power to the coil. So I did a little testing at the switch. I jumped it and was able to get power down to the coil. So now with a little cleaning on the switch, I should still be able to jump this so that it will start and run, but ultimately it is going to need an ignition switch. Alright, so you can look at this switch and tell that it's had a lot of corrosion over time. This terminal right here is actually the power feed. That's what feeds power to all of it from the battery. It is really rusted and corroded.
And then this is the one that feeds the coil, and then the one up here actually feeds the solenoid to crank it. I did some testing on this with a meter and found that they're all actually working, crank position and all. So I think once we get all these things cleaned up and clean the wiring up on it, I think the switch is going to work fine and it's going to work like it's supposed to. Okay, so you can clearly see that there's been a lot of resistance there, overheating. Melted the connector, and to the left of that you can even see where the red wires chafed and burned a little. So that's had a lot to do with this thing intermittently not starting and any other electrical issues it may have had. So we're going to get rid of this connector completely, put in some spade connectors, and give it a try that way. Alright, this isn't completely done. It's not as professional as I'd like for it to be, but it is going to allow me to see if this is going to start. So with the switch on, I do now have power to the coil. And it does actually crank now, where it didn't before. It had to be jumped with a screwdriver. So we'll see if this thing's going to fire off like it's supposed to, then we'll put it all back together. Just like it's supposed to. Here's one of the tractor panels finished and done. You can see some clouds and trees in it. They came out really good. Didn't bore you with any of the wet sanding and polishing that took place, as you've seen some of that before. But maybe I'll add some of that in the coming weeks as I'm doing some of the other panels. Next time on Bulldog Builds, I'll have more of the pull tractor panels painted. I'll try to have the Goldwing carburetors back together. And hopefully I'll have some video footage of some of my current and past graduates and some of the things that they're up to right now. See you next week.